Good afternoon, friends. Welcome to another Word of Gourd. Average Folks in the Afterlife, number 37. And we're continuing on with Erik Medhus and My Life After Death. And I just noticed a moment ago that I've placed the book, quite unconsciously, with his photograph right there. I wonder if I don't think he looks like that now, but you never know. The spirits get settled in the afterlife and learn a few of the ropes. They can change their appearance at will. And I think in An American in Heaven, my novel, I had character Melanie talks about making herself look like, what did she say, sort of a Julianne Moore type film star with, the beautiful hair. And then she finds out that, dozens of other girls have done the same thing. So ultimately, if you want to look individual over there, if you model yourself after somebody famous, as folk are prone to do, in praise and love and imitation, you're liable to look like a whole lot of other people as well. And that doesn't bother you. Why not? Anyway, we're getting to the stage of his memoir here, this channeled memoir, where he's coming onto his life review. And this notion of life reviews has become popularized more through the past life regression and between life regression literature, where many people, sometimes at the prompting of their regressionist, who sometimes they should be a little more careful about suggesting things to people. And certainly Michael Newton and his disciples have brought this thing about, insisting that everyone has a life review, regardless of what kind of a life they live. And I would just say that it's my experience as an out-of-body explorer and a regressionist that not everyone has a life review. No one forces you to have one, because no one can. Not your spirit guides, not your messiah, not your belief system. You have one if you choose to do so, and that choice may be expressed at a deeply, subconscious level. But this whole notion of judgment and karma and wise old souls reviewing your life and making suggestions, it's optional. Now, most people choose to do it when given the chance, but they may take many years of splashing about in the pleasures of paradise before they do so. Lots of folk get there and they're just like so tired of the stresses and strains and demands of family life, societal life, economic life, that they just want to party. And who am I to blame them? I certainly wouldn't. I like to point it out, but I don't assign blame to anybody. Anyway, here's Erik's experience. Once the table of 6 spirits had shown up, I knew that I had entered the next step on whatever this journey was that I was on now. I was a little scared, but I also felt ready. They told me I was about to enter my life review. My immediate thought was, what the fuck is that? It wasn't like they rolled out this scroll and said, welcome, Erik. Here's how this is going to go down. What a wag. There really weren't any verbal instructions because the spirits didn't have voices. They seemed to transmit thoughts straight into my head, and those thoughts felt very supportive. The spirits told me that during my review I was going to be shown things. I wasn't given the option to do or not to do my life review. I was just told that it was going to happen, and that would help me understand who I was and how to forgive myself. I didn't even realize that I was looking for forgiveness until they told me I'd be shown how to look for it. Now that is a classic line. I'll just say it again, just in case you missed it. I didn't even realize that I was looking for forgiveness until they told me I'd be shown how to look for it. Now, in my opinion, that's Christian overhang, whether you're going to church or not. North America is a very Christian country, as are many other countries. And the subtle demands and expectations of that worldview tend to bleed through to those who are not practicing at all. But anyway, whether you're standing before the central committee or the school board or the life review team, it's all about subtle, semi-conscious expectations of what you need and what you deserve. Myself, I tend to favor Pete Townshend's view as expressed in one of those very famous songs by The Who. I don't need to be forgiven. You can imagine Roger Daltrey singing that, I'm sure. You want some forgiveness? By all means, go for it. I'm just saying you don't have to have it. The table had a screen on it that I could look down on, but I could see everything 360 degrees around me. Then the table changed shape, morphing into what seemed like one of those theaters where the screen wraps around you. But it wasn't like I was sitting down in a movie theater, staring straight ahead at a screen, eating popcorn and drinking a Coke. As I was contemplating this whole setup, something unexpected happened. All of a sudden, everything from when I was tiny, tiny baby to the moment I died, the good, the bad, and the ugly, came flying at me from all directions. First came my birth. I felt myself being squeezed out of my mom. I felt her joy and her pain. I felt my family's excitement. And what followed was even more intense, to say the least. As my entire life unfolded before me, I was not only experiencing every single moment I ever lived, but I was also observing and feeling what everybody else in my life went through in reaction to whatever I said or did to them. I felt their joy, their hurt, their disappointment, shit like that. I saw their reactions to when I lied, when I withheld my feelings, when I didn't help someone who needed me, when I was mean, when I gave too much, and when I gave too little. I also got to see and feel all the good things I said and did too. Seeing how everyone chose to interact with my choices was fucking powerful. Not only could I feel the emotions they had in response to my actions, but I could actually see things from their perspective. It was like I was them. I got everything down to the smallest little detail, like how many times that person blinked and how many times they swallowed in their lifetime, all experienced simultaneously. That's how detailed it was. Whew, overwhelming, wouldn't you say? But he seems to have handled it quite well. Congratulations, Erik. I wasn't in control of the review. I couldn't change it and I couldn't fast forward or rewind through any of it. I wasn't thinking, oh, you know what would have been better? Let's hit the rewind button and watch that nice thing I did when I was 5 again and then skip through that shitty thing I did when I was 14. Nah, it just came at me. Man, I would have paid to have that ability while I was alive because I probably wouldn't have navigated through my life differently. It's the most powerful experience that you could ever have, whether dead or alive, because we crave an understanding of our choices. I got that with my review. I didn't ask for it, I just got it. Of course, that raises the philosophical question of, getting things that you don't ask for and then, beware of what you ask for because you'll get it, in truckloads. And many of us have circled around that one, chattering away. I would say even life on the physical plane is about manifestation. It takes a lot longer here, but what you desire, and not what you just consciously desire, but what you secretly desire beneath that conscious, I want that car, I want that dress, I want that lover, there's the subconscious, oh, I don't really deserve that car or that lover or that increase in pay because I'm a second-class person, I'm a sinful being, I'm mean, I'm selfish, I'm this, I'm that, and I'm brain dead and stupid. A lot of that stuff goes on with the desire and the how come I didn't get that desire because people told me I could desire it and get it. Well, anyway, it's a complex issue. And while you can state it simply, I don't think the deeper understanding of how it all operates can be expressed simply. It has to be explored. And usually that exploration takes a good part of a lifetime. One of the great things I remember during my life review was when I was given my first motorcycle, a dirt bike for motocross racing. I couldn't have been more than 9 or 10, but that was the time I knew my mum and dad really trusted my abilities. They knew that no matter what situation I came across, I'd be able to handle it. That was a huge moment for me. I was so proud of myself. The other memory in that review that made me happy was when I became an uncle. Oh, I remember when I became an uncle. I was only 7. My sisters started having babies while I was quite young, and all of a sudden I was an uncle. I got to go back to that moment when I held my niece Arlene. I was afraid of holding someone so small. I was scared that I'd drop her and hold her the wrong way. I thought, why would they trust me to hold her? Because to me, I wasn't someone I'd trust. I looked down at her and realized how tiny she was and how big my arms seemed in comparison. She didn't even cry. She was just so happy to be in my arms. It was the first time I cried tears of joy. I remember really clearly one time when I was a kind of a dick to a friend. He was jerking me around a little bit. He'd tell me to come over but then wouldn't be there, or he'd tell me I was his friend but not step up when I needed him. So I let him have it. It wasn't physical, and I didn't call him names or insult him. I just said some mean things. I totally lost my shit because I couldn't see that all I had to do was walk away. After I blew up at him, this dude was never the same. If I'd handled the situation differently, maybe things would have been different between us, or he would have turned out differently. Now he's afraid that the things he says might cause him to lose a friend in the same way he lost me. Fear is what keeps him in line now, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Oh, I think some people would disagree with you there, Eric. There's a lot of people in our society that thinks having fear keeping us in line is a really good idea. And not just politicians either. Anyway, it's a debatable point, and I see why you're making the point you're making. During the review, I learned that the friend that bullied me because he himself was abused and was beaten down. It wasn't my intent to do the same to him, even though I was just putting him in line for the shit we were going through. It triggered that part of his past. You never know how your words or actions might affect someone. It was fucked up intense to feel his sense of belittlement, fear, and inadequacy firsthand, let me tell you. He felt small, but he didn't show that on his face, so I never knew. With my review, I was able to see his authentic emotions, his authentic self. From that part of my review, I learned that responsibility is never only on one person's shoulders. It is meant to be shared. Yes, I had to be accountable for the things I'd said to my friend, but I couldn't be responsible for how he reacted. He had to be responsible for that. My life review made me feel like I had been cast in a role and played it. And when it was over, I got to read the reviews, knowing that I was just a character in the play that was my life. Penny Lane? And though she feels as if she's in a play, she is anyway. It's weird. It's not like I thought, bro, give me a red pen. I got to make edits to that character. Because I knew that whatever choices I'd made were just a part of that play. As a human, I was playing myself. As a spirit, I truly am myself. And I'm looking back at the part I played. During my review, I started to have these epiphanies of exactly who I was through the role I played. All the questions like, why did I behave like that? Or why was I a dick to that person? Or why did I make that decision? Or why was I nice to that person? Became part of the bigger picture of what and why I was here to learn. These lessons were all related to my intent, whether it had to do with something constructive or destructive. For instance, let's say one day I decided to stomp on a bunch of ants. That might be a lesson for me to understand that ants have feelings, and by hurting the ants, I also hurt myself. We all live as a collective, animals, plants, humans, all living beings. So the lesson I would have gotten from killing those ants would be that we're all connected, and when we hurt each other, we hurt ourselves. Every action has a reaction. Those kind of epiphanies during a review can be very profound. They were definitely for me. Well, of course, I'd argue that point, but you know me, I'll argue anything. Um, it's an interesting argument, but where's the boundary line between stepping on ants and yanking a carrot out of the garden to eat it? We know from various kinds of experimentation that carrots are excited with paranoia and fear and a number of other things when they're yanked out of the garden, and so are eggs. When you think about putting up a boiling kettle and pouring it on the egg, this has been worked on and tested, but lots of folk who argue for the sentience of animals, fish, insects, like to ignore that because it really makes their lives uncomfortable. They can avoid the suffering of animals and fish and insects, but oh no, we can't avoid the suffering of insects. Therefore, they have to accept that suffering is endemic to all experience on the physical plane. You can't avoid suffering. It is impossible. You have to embrace it. And that is a tough lesson for a lot of people to learn. And it tends to keep a lot of them from full enlightenment because they want to stop at the stage of partial enlightenment, which is something I deal with in my I wouldn't call it ministry, but my teaching. You can't stop at partial enlightenment. You got to keep going to the whole thing. And basically, the whole thing tells you that all form is illusion. All living form is illusion. It all dies, it all suffers, and it's all an illusion. Because essentially, we're all just spirit. All of us, including the carrots. My life review also allowed me to see every possible outcome for every choice I'd made in my life. And as you can imagine, the possibilities are infinite. For instance, if I hadn't consoled my sister, Michelle, when she'd had a bad breakup with her boyfriend, things might have played out differently. If I had been an insensitive prick instead, she might have ended up in bad shape, and I saw that if she and I hadn't been so close, my niece might never have been born. Every single moment is affected by every other moment. Life is like a long, twisting line of dominoes, and our choices dictate which ones fall where. Throughout my life review, sometimes I would drop my head down on the table and cry. And other times I would fling my head back and laugh. But I never felt judged by those six spirits, and I never had that feeling that I'd done something wrong. It's weird to explain, but that was the first time I understood that there is no right and wrong. You got that one right, bud. I wasn't feeling judged because there is no concept of judgment or shame here. I looked at each moment, each experience for what it was, a valuable lesson, no more, no less. So I had no need or desire to fix or take back anything I'd done. Got that right, bud. When you're alive, you usually live by a set of morals and values, parameters that you either set for yourself or that society or religion sets for you, and that's mostly a good thing. In general, people need codes of ethics to live by in order to function in society, but those codes often dictate how we react to situations, with joy, with fear, with shame, with anger, and all that stuff. Here, it's not like we're lawless being running amok, messing with shit just because we feel like it. No, it's more like we've transcended concepts like right and wrong, good and bad, and all that, and entered a plane of existence outside the definition and the need for definition of concepts like that. Anyway, at the very end of my life review, I came to the moment when I died. Even though I knew no one was judging me for taking my life, I kind of cringed inside because I knew how much pain it was causing for the people I love. But that feeling of non-judgment comforted me, and that's why I started to forgive myself. That forgiveness would become one of the biggest parts of my healing. How long did my life review last? 2 seconds? 24 hours? I really don't know because there's no linear time here. But everything seemed to happen in an instant. Think of those movies where visuals flash by really quickly. What's that called? A montage? It was kind of like that, but even that's linear, just at a fast frame rate. I got a sense of everything in one quick flash, an instant download from beginning to end. After my review was all over, there I was, still in this white room. That's when six spirits explained to me that the purpose of exposing me to what I had just witnessed was to gain something from my experience as a human. They also told me that whether I knew it at the time or not, I, along with other spirits that had crossed my path, had designed everything in my life. My life had been about creating contrast. For example, they told me that in order to completely learn about forgiveness, I had to betray myself or someone else. In order to learn the value of relationships, I had to go through some shitty ones or not have many at all. It was a rough way to learn such important lessons, but that's the way it was meant for me to be, and I see that now. Yeah, you have to betray someone in order to learn about forgiveness. You know, this is a very important point. Going down the dark path or the path of meanness, nastiness, selfishness, even if it's only for 10 minutes, it does teach you something. And all those teachings that say, oh, don't do this and don't do that and be a goody-goody, while useful to an extent, really ultimately are limiting, because the learning of lessons and the playing of roles in life, and I mean that in the broadest sense, absolutely the broadest, it can only function if, darkness and light are pursued, I wouldn't say equally, but with equal intensity, equal determination. You just can't do it by being a goody-goody following the rules. You just cannot do it. Now, some of us may have done all this stuff in past lives and, are moving to a point where we're sort of, a few feet from being a goody-goody, because we've learned from karmic reactions to all the dark stuff we've done in past lives that, oh, well, maybe that's not really worth it. And so you focus more on maybe not the good stuff, but the neutral stuff. Because the good stuff and the bad stuff, to oversimplify, each has karmic reactions. You think by being a really selfless, wonderful, loving person, you avoid karma? There's plenty of it. So being neutral, sort of going down the middle path and not overly, indulging in one side or the other, that's actually the best. Although, I'm sure people would argue it. Man, there's so much happens in your life review. The main thing I got out of it was a deep understanding of right and wrong. Like I said, you're no longer ruled by right versus wrong guidelines, and there's no self-judgment like there is in human life. Without that judgment, I was able to forgive myself. Like I said, that was definitely the most powerful part of my life review experience. After it was over, nobody really took my hand and showed me the way out. It wasn't like some movie was over. No curtain closed. I didn't walk down the aisle with popcorn sticking to my feet, and I didn't have to wait in a long-ass line for the bathroom. Instead, puff! The space started to disappear, pinhole by pinhole, 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, and it just kind of evaporated altogether. If I could have still held my breath, I would have. I wondered what was going to happen next. And let me just comment also that the very fact that a suicide, self-admitted suicide, not blaming anyone else, is in heaven telling us this, or some version of heaven, is more important than many of us tend to realize. Now, I'm sure that there'd be, I would say, millions of Christians that wouldn't accept this. Because, how do suicides even wind up in heaven? Because there's centuries of teaching that say they don't. That they wind up, well, I guess the Catholic teaching would be purgatory, and you kind of resolve all your issues in purgatory and then move on. And that is, reasonably accurate, except the purgatorial realms and the hell realms and the sort of paradise realms and the heavenly realms, they're all just different stages on that journey. And they are distinct realms. There's no question. I've explored that, as many others have too, like our friend Jürgen Zhu, who we were reading from recently. But Are you held there? Only by your own self-limitation, really. But this book is important in many, many ways. Certainly in my earlier books, I made a great point about suicides and not being held back as much as people think, because there are many, many motivations for suicide. There's Eric's, but there's plenty of others. And I had one in my Eternal Life and How to Enjoy It book, which maybe I'll get to on another episode. It'd take me a couple of minutes to find it. I should have gotten it out earlier, about a teenage couple that off themselves in the family car with the pipe from the tailpipe coming into gassing yourself. And they were basically sort of a Romeo and Juliet couple whose romance wasn't supported by either of their families for the usual reasons. And they were fine in heaven when I ran into them, or was it? I think it was my guide Henry. He ran into them and then told me the story. But it's an important issue, and many, many millions of people just would not believe that, and we'll just put it right out of their reality tunnel, if you like. And so that's the importance of spirit communications, which have been praised and lauded by spiritualists since the 1860s, 70s. And forget the Fox sisters and the faking it and the boozing because they couldn't handle their stress. There's plenty of useful, real, and applicable teachings from the early spiritualists, even though they were limited by their Christian faith. They did understand many notions that we take for granted today. They did see through the illusion of encrusted static theology to a much more flexible understanding of the manifested worlds and our experience within them as we pass through them. Basically on our way to another life, although they didn't see that. They saw it as on the way to heaven, permanent residence in heaven. But, that's, again, another stage. All of which is kind of taken for granted now, at least in the New Age community. But it wasn't then. But spiritualism is the roots of what we're reading and doing now, no question. Esoteric teachings too, we know from Middle Ages, Renaissance, earlier, right back to ancient Egypt really. Esoteric teachings, such as the things we talk about on this show, were driven underground. And you could find out by joining secret societies, Rosicrucians, Masons, even when Masons didn't have a name, Knights Templar, etc., etc. And they were completely underground, or they had above ground covers and sort of pretended to be something else. Because the Catholic Church would just repress you and or eliminate you in a very unfriendly fashion. So just a few historical notes there as we proceed through Erik Medhus's marvelously entertaining memoir, My Life After Death. And we will get back to this sooner than you think. Maybe even sooner than I think. Until then, au revoir mes enfants.